My husband called me on a Tuesday afternoon in October, while I was sitting in my sister's kitchen in Kelowna, watching the last of the leaves come off the maple in her backyard. I remember thinking how beautiful it looked, that particular kind of letting go that autumn does so effortlessly. "I want a divorce," he said. No preamble. No softening. "And I've already spoken to a broker about selling the firm. Diane and I are starting something new." He said it the way he always delivered bad news in business, quickly, cleanly, like ripping off a bandage that belonged to someone else. I heard him draw a breath, probably waiting for me to cry, or beg, or say his name in that broken way I had during our worst arguments years ago. "Okay," I said. Silence. "Okay." He repeated it like the word didn't make sense in that order. "I heard you," I said. "Drive safe." I hung up and set the phone face down on my sister's kitchen table. She looked at me from across the counter, a mug halfway to her lips. "That was my husband," I told her. "He's leaving me for Diane." She put the mug down. "What are you going to do?" I picked up my phone and opened my calendar. "I have a meeting with our accountant on Thursday. I'm going to keep it." What my husband didn't know, what he had never bothered to find out. In 11 years of marriage and 8 years of building what had become one of the most respected independent real estate brokerages in the Greater Toronto Area, was that I had seen this coming for 14 months. Not Diane, specifically, but someone. And the firm being used as an exit vehicle. That part I had known, since the February before last. When I found a draft email he forgot to close on our shared home computer, addressed to a commercial lawyer I didn't recognize, asking about options for a fast-track asset transfer in the case of partnership dissolution. He wasn't in a business partnership. He was in a marriage. I closed the tab without touching anything else and sat very still for a long time. Then I got to work. My husband was the face of Callaway and Reed Realty. He was tall, warm, remembered every client's dog's name and their kids' hockey schedules. He was genuinely good at what he did, the front of it, anyway. The listings, the handshakes, the charity golf tournaments. He could walk into a room and make every person in it feel like the most important one there. That was real, and I had loved it about him once. What was also real? I had built the infrastructure that made all of it possible. I had written the operations manual, negotiated our office leases in Mississauga and North York, managed the agent commission structures, maintained our compliance with RICO requirements, and over the past 3 years had quietly guided us through an expansion that doubled our registered agents from 12 to 26. Our brokerage fees, our referral networks, our insurance policies, our data systems, those were mine. The firm ran on my decisions, the way a house runs on its foundation, invisibly and completely. He had never once asked to see the shareholder agreement we signed when we incorporated. I had read it approximately 40 times. On Thursday, I kept my meeting with our accountant, Martin, who had been doing our books since year 2. I brought a folder. Martin is a careful man, the kind who wears the same brand of gray cardigan every day and never makes a joke he isn't sure will land. He looked at what I put in front of him and was quiet for a moment. "How long have you been building this?" he asked. 14 months, I said. "Is it solid?" He went through it page by page. "It's solid," he said. "You understand that once this is filed, the structure is locked." "That's the point," I said. What I had done was not complicated, but it required patience and precision. Using entirely legitimate mechanisms, a corporate restructuring that our business lawyer, Patricia, had walked me through carefully and documented at every step. I had reorganized the ownership of Callaway and Reed such that the operating assets of the brokerage, including our client database, our agent contracts, our office leases, and our brand licensing, were held through a holding company of which I was the sole director. My husband retained his 50% equity stake in the original corporation, which now held primarily the firm's name and its historical goodwill. Without the operating assets, that stake was worth considerably less than he imagined. None of this was hidden from him. All of it was filed with the proper registries. He simply never read the documents Patricia sent. He signed where she highlighted, the way he always had, because he trusted me to handle the paperwork, and I always had. I drove back to Toronto that Friday. My husband was at the house when I arrived, which surprised me. I expected him to have cleared out during the week. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the island, and Diane was sitting at our table. She had been to our house before, at firm parties, always careful and pleasant and just slightly too interested in the way my husband moved through a room. Sarah, he said, which is not my name, but I understood he needed to feel in control of something. We need to talk about the sale. I set my bag on the counter. Of what? The firm. He had a folder of his own. He slid it across the island. I've been in contact with a buyer. A regional franchise group. They're prepared to move fast. I opened the folder. The offer was for the full brokerage client list, leases, brand, agent contracts, the works. He's offering $2.3 million, my husband said. Split evenly, that's a very clean exit for both of us. Diane watched me with the particular expression of someone who has already mentally spent their share of a sum of money. I closed the folder. This offer is for assets that aren't yours to sell, I said. My husband's expression didn't change right away. He had a gift for keeping his face neutral under pressure, another thing that had served him well in negotiations. What are you talking about? We're 50-50 partners. We were 50-50 partners in the original corporation, I said. The operating assets were transferred to a holding company 14 months ago. Patricia can walk you through the structure if you'd like, but the short version is that this buyer is offering $2.3 million for something you don't have the authority to sell. The silence in the kitchen was a different kind than the one on the phone from Kelowna. This one had weight. Diane leaned forward. Ryan told me the firm was jointly owned. My husband has a habit of telling people what they want to hear, I said, and I kept my voice completely even. You're welcome to review the corporate registry filings. Everything is documented and above board. Patricia made sure of that. My husband's face had shifted now. The neutrality was cracking at the edges. You restructured the company without telling me? I restructured the company with full legal documentation that was sent to your email, signed by you, and filed with the Ontario Business Registry. I told you every time something needed your signature. I paused. You just never asked what you were signing. He pushed off from the counter. This is fraud. It's corporate restructuring, I said. Patricia's number is in your contacts. I'd recommend calling her before you say that word to anyone else. Diane stood up. She picked up her purse slowly, the way people do when they're recalculating something and need a moment they hope looks like a gesture. I need to make some calls, she said. She left. Her heels on our hardwood floors made a sound I still remember clearly. My husband stood in our kitchen for a long time after that, looking at the folder on the island as though it might change what was inside it. If you had just asked me for a divorce, I said, I would have been fair. We could have sold the firm together and divided everything properly. But you went to a lawyer about asset transfers before you even told me the marriage was over. You planned to take the business and leave me with equity in a shell company. I picked up my bag. So now you have exactly that. Equity in a shell company. I went upstairs. I heard the front door close an hour later. The weeks that followed were not quiet. My husband retained a lawyer, a good one, actually, who sent a series of increasingly pointed letters to Patricia arguing various theories about the restructuring. Patricia responded to each one with documented evidence that every transaction had been properly disclosed, properly signed, and properly filed. There was nothing to challenge. I had been meticulous. What his lawyer did find, however, while reviewing the corporate financials in preparation for the divorce proceedings, was something I had not planted and had not needed to. In the course of the past 3 years, my husband had been running personal expenses through the firm's operating account. Not enormous amounts individually: a car lease, a renovation on a property he owned before we married, 3 international trips that had nothing to do with client development. Individually, easy to explain. Collectively, when Martin laid them out in a single document, they totaled just over $91,000 in improperly expensed personal costs that had reduced the firm's taxable income. Martin, who is a careful and ethical man, noted that he had a reporting obligation. I know, I told him. This will complicate the divorce proceedings significantly, he said. I know that too. I want to be precise about something. I did not cause this. I did not manufacture this. My husband had been doing it, presumably assuming no one would ever sit down and look at it all at once. What I did was not prevent it from being found. The CRA audit notice arrived 6 weeks after Martin made his report. My husband called me from his new apartment, the one he was renting in Leslieville, while we sorted through the separation, and his voice was different from any version of it I had recognized before. Not angry. Not performatively calm. Just tired. Did you know about the expenses? he asked. I knew there were irregularities, I said. I flagged them to Martin when I was doing the restructuring review. And you didn't tell me. You were planning to leave me and take the company, I said. No. I didn't tell you. Another long silence. Then. What do you want, Sarah? A fair settlement, I said. The firm stays with me. I'll buy out your equity in the holding company at a fair assessed value. You keep your personal assets, your investment accounts, the Muskoka property. We divide the house proceeds evenly. And you cooperate fully with the CRA process, because the records are clean on the brokerage side, and this does not need to become a bigger problem than it already is. His lawyer called Patricia the following Monday. The negotiation took 6 weeks and was not without difficulty, but it concluded. My husband accepted the terms. What I had not expected, what genuinely surprised me, was what happened at the firm while all of this was unfolding. Our agents knew something was happening. In a brokerage, things travel. I called a firm-wide meeting on the 3rd Friday of November, in our Mississauga office, and I told them the truth in the most straightforward terms I could manage. My husband and I were separating, the firm was not being sold. I was the operating director and the brokerage would continue without interruption. I told them our client commitments were intact, their commission structures were unchanged, and anyone who had questions could come to me directly. 23 of our 26 agents stayed. 3 left with my husband, who had announced separately, and without the operating assets he had planned to take, that he was opening a new independent brokerage with Diane. One of the agents who stayed was a woman named B, who had been with us since year 3 and was one of our top producers. She came up to me after the meeting and said, very quietly, "We always knew who actually ran this place." I didn't know what to say to that. I thanked her. The buyer who had made the $2.3 million offer, the franchise group, called Patricia a month later. They were still interested. Not in a full acquisition, but in a partnership arrangement with the holding company. A co-branding agreement that would give us access to their national referral network in exchange for a minority stake. I took the meeting. I brought Martin. The offer they put on the table was better than the original acquisition price by a significant margin, because they weren't buying something they could flip, they were buying into something that was demonstrably still running, fully staffed, and operationally stable, through a significant disruption. I had made a point of ensuring our Q4 numbers were as strong as I could make them. They were. We reached an agreement in February. The day the partnership papers were signed, Patricia took me to lunch at a place on King Street that I had always liked and never quite managed to justify going to on a regular Tuesday. She ordered wine, which she rarely does at lunch, and she looked at me across the table with an expression I couldn't immediately place. "You knew when you first came to me," she said. "You knew exactly what you wanted to build." "I knew what I needed to protect," I said. "Is there a difference?" I thought about that for a moment. About my husband in the kitchen with his folder, so certain he had already won. About Diane picking up her purse. About the February night I'd closed a browser tab and sat very still and then decided, without drama, what I was going to do next. "I don't think so," I said. Not in the end. The divorce was finalized the following April. The terms held. My husband's new brokerage opened in March with 4 agents, which was a reasonable start. Diane was not among them. She had moved to a large corporate firm downtown, which was probably the right move for her. I wished her no particular ill. She had attached herself to what she thought was the power in a room. That's a miscalculation many people make. There is a thing people say about revenge, that it should be served cold, that it should be satisfying in some clean and complete way. I am not sure I experienced it as revenge. What I experienced was closer to the sensation of finishing something I had started, of seeing a structure hold the weight it was built to hold. I had spent 14 months building carefully, precisely, without shortcuts, because I understood that the only way to protect what I had built over 8 years was to be more thorough than the person who wanted to take it from me. My husband had been very good at the front of things. He was warm and charming, and he made people feel seen. None of that was false. But he had never understood that the front of a thing only stands because of what's behind it. I understood that. I had been behind it from the beginning. The firm now has 31 agents. We're expanding into a 3rd office location in Oakville next spring. The franchise partnership has opened referral pipelines we're still learning to use. Martin reviews our books every quarter, meticulously, as he has always done, and the numbers are clean. My sister called me in May, after the divorce was finalized, and asked me how I felt. I was in my own kitchen, my kitchen now, though the house had sold and I was in a new place in the East End, smaller, with better light. I was making coffee and looking out at a small yard that had nothing in it yet but grass and potential. Lighter, I told her. I feel lighter. She said. I think you knew, even in October, what was going to happen. I knew what I had built, I said. I just needed him to confirm it was worth fighting for. She laughed. I laughed. I poured my coffee. There is a particular kind of clarity that comes from being underestimated by someone who was supposed to know you. It is painful, genuinely painful, in a way I won't minimize. I had loved my husband. I had believed in the thing we were building together. The loss of that, the real loss, the one underneath the legal proceedings and the corporate filings was something I was still moving through, slowly, as honestly as I could. But there is something else that comes with it too. A knowledge of what you are capable of when you stop performing the performance of what someone else decided you were. When you stop being the background of their story and recognize, with the particular quietness of certainty, that you were always the story itself. The maple in my new yard will turn in October. I've been watching for it. I have learned to find something beautiful in that kind of letting go. But I have also learned, and I will not forget this, the difference between letting go and being taken from. I know which one that was. And I know, now, that I will never confuse the two again.